stampinlorraine.com. I'm a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator here in the United States, and I'd like to share with you today a technique that uses vellum. Now, this is kind of fun to do because you stamp on both sides of the vellum. One side is actually stamped, the other side is heat embossed. So it gives a really nice effect of some depth in your card. And we're going to use some shapes that we're going to create like a window for the vellum to sit in. And we have some cards that look something like this. I'm going to show you some of those, plus another little version of that card as well. So stay tuned to the very end so you don't miss a single tip or trick or an idea for another version of this card. I hope you like the technique, and I hope you tune in to see my blog at stampwithlorraine.com. Also follow me on Facebook under Stamp with Lorraine as well. And don't forget to sign up for my mailing list from my blog. On the sidebar, you can sign up there and also get a free tutorial. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial. And like I said, stay tuned to the very end because you will get to see all the projects listed there. Okay, thanks for watching. All right, and we're off. Okay. So, and because we're doing this this white card, this card with a lot of white space to keep a nice clean simple look, I suggest using your thick white cardstock because it will give a more firm base to your card. Okay, so then once you have your card base, you're also going to eventually have a white layer that goes on top of that. So you need 5 1/4 by 4. All right, but then to do our actual focal point, we're going to need dies that are concentric shapes, like 2 sizes that are right next to each other. So I have here the stylish shapes dies. You have squares and banners and circles. You can use your stitched rectangles or squares or circles. I haven't tried this one with a circle yet, but I would love to, and I'll get that up later on. So watch to the end to see one with the circle. I am using the 2 biggest ones on this stylish shapes. The biggest square, but like I said, this you can do any square with that you want with this. It's a 3-inch square for the first one, and the next size down is 2 1/2. So if you see, they will nest right inside each other, and when we run that through the cut and emboss machine, it's going to create a frame. So it's going to give us the frame that you see here. All right, and then the inside you can save for something else. So I'm going to run that through. So since this is a 3-inch square, I'm going to use a piece of paper that's about 3 1/4, 3 1/4 wide, and then I'll run that through. Let me bring this in a little bit. Okay, and you're going to make some space here. Okay, you're going to put your square down and then line the other one up right inside so it's all nice and even, parallel lines. And try to keep the same amount of space all the way around. When doing dies with straight edges, it's always helpful to put it on a little bit of an angle so that the point goes under the rollers first and it makes it easier to roll through. If you put it in straight, then the rollers are going over all of this at one time like a big hump, and it's a little more tricky trying to get that in there. So put it in a little bit of an angle, it'll roll a lot easier. Kind of like when you're driving your car over a bump, a speed hump or a curb or something. It's a lot easier to do it on an angle rather than both tires at once. Okay, so we're going to cover that up and I'm going to roll it. Okay, I'll put the dies aside. Put this aside. And then this is what we're left with. We're not going to need the middle. Unless I try something new, I might use the middle later on. So you're left with this nice little frame. And this one is fun because it has stitching on the outside and the inside when it's cut out. So it's really nice. The inside piece has the stitching on the outside here. So that's fun. Okay, so now that we have that, you need a piece of vellum. I'm going to just put this aside for a moment with our other pieces. You need a piece of vellum that is 2 5/8 square. And that's going to eventually be glued onto the back of this frame. So that gives us just enough to overlap the frame. So that's why 2 5/8 works perfectly, because this the outer part that we cut out is 2 3/4. So it gives us just enough that we're going to glue it on there before we pop it up. It's going to be kind of like a window, right? A little frosted window. All right, so now let's get to the stamping part. Okay, just so you can see. All right, so that's my vellum there, and I'm going to actually duplicate the card I just showed you. I used Parakeet Party and Shaded Spruce for the colors on the back, and we're going to use Versamark for the embossing, heat embossing on the front. You also need white embossing powder, and it's helpful to also have the Stamping Buddy, which is just a little pouch of some powdery substance inside. You roll, just dust your vellum with it. It takes away some of the static, and extra powder will not stick to that. All right, I'm going to use 2 different stamp sets, so don't think that you can't mix and match your stamp sets. I like the flower from here, from the Hello Ladybug. It's a group of 3 flowers in the same stamp. And I'm going to use the leaves from here, from the Sweet Songbirds, because I thought they were similar in style, and I will match those. So here are my flowers. I'm going to stamp on the Versamark. And you're not going to see this real well on your vellum. It's just going to show up. If you hold it up to the light, you can see like a little white, wet area, not white, little wet area. So just kind of have an idea where you're going with this. You can hold it up and see, hold it to the light, you see a little bit of a shine. The Versamark is a little bit of a sticky pad. And you'll just get a little bit down here. Now you will see it when you put your embossing powder on. I haven't done much with heat embossing on my videos, so I'll show that here. Okay, so we're going to take our powder. I'm going to carefully hold the edge here, and I'm going to sprinkle the powder onto the vellum, spread it around, and wherever that sticky Versamark ink was, the powder's going to stick to that. Now I see a little bit up here that I missed. I'm going to put more here. Now don't worry, we're not wasting the powder, because in this cute little tray, I can collect it and put it right back into the jar that it came in. Okay, now this is a powder pal, they called it back in the day when I was early in stamping. I had gotten one of these, but it's back in the catalog now as a little kit with, I think, an embossing buddy and the tray, maybe a little brush. I'm forgetting exactly what's in the kit, but it's there. All right, so now that this is covering the Versamark, this can stay for days. You don't have to rush to do this part. You do want to get your powder on before the Versamark dries, however. But once the powder's on, you don't have to be in such a rush to heat it. But you will need your heat tool. Okay, this is an old one. Stampin' Up does have one in the catalog. And we're going to heat this so that that powder kind of melts. All right, so I'm going to hold it over my silicone mat just so it might be easier for you to see that happening. Okay, so a little bit of noise here. You want to run your heat gun for a couple seconds to make sure it gets nice and hot before you start to bring it over your project. I'm going to hold this here, and I'm going to hold it down with my bone folder. So that's another way to do that. Okay, I'm going to hold my heat gun over there until it melts and gets shiny. Okay, so I suggest just holding it there until it starts to melt, and then go across it, and it will melt like a wave washing over that dry powder. You don't want to get too close, and you don't want to hold it there too long. Once it's shiny, it's done. Okay, all done. Sometimes with the heat, the vellum will curve a little bit, but that's okay. It's going to be glued down, and the foam will help that too. All right, so I'm going to let that dry just for a minute, and you can see nice bold flowers there. And now we're going to stamp on the back. So like I said, well, it's dry, it's just a little warm. I just want to make sure I don't mess that up. We're going to use Parakeet Party and Shaded Spruce. These were the colors that I saw Heidi use, so I'm borrowing her scheme here. I just thought it was kind of fun. I might not have thought to do that. It kind of has a tropical look to it for me. Okay, so this is what I'm using for the leaves in the background. Now, don't be horrified, but these leaves were all connected in one stamp. And I went and I took my little paper snips, nice sharp scissors, and I cut them apart. I know this is hard to do sometimes, but I really wanted to be able to stamp those separately, and I think in the future I might want to do that too. Now the reason why they have them together is so that they could fit onto this branch nicely, and you would only have to use one stamp for that. See, this would go right on there, which is lovely. But it's easy enough now. If I wanted to, let me see if I can get this on the camera, just to butt these up against each other, because don't do this with your rubber stamp, just with your with the photopolymer. I can butt those right up against each other, and it's like they were never cut. All right, so just a little snip there. I sometimes do that with some of my sentiments where I might not want them all in one row. I might want to split them up so I have 2 rows of the sentiment. So I am getting better at doing that. More confident in doing that, let me say. Okay. All right, so we're going to flip this over, and we're going to stamp on the back. I'm going to do the bigger leaf in the Parakeet Party. Now, when you're stamping on vellum, it's a more slippery surface, so you have to be careful not to smudge it. You want to very carefully come down on it and pick it up. And you're going to get a much softer look, to that stamped image. So I'm going to stamp my bigger leaves all around. You can overlap the flowers. It's okay, because in nature it would look like that. You just don't want to slide it. So you want to be careful to hold it come down on it gently and pick it up straight up. So like I said, the measurements for this are really not as important as just trying the technique. Because obviously you can do this with any size shape dies. Okay, let's put that aside for a minute and then go to the Shaded Spruce. Okay, now on my first card I stamped off on this and then went on it for a more subtle look. I think I'll try full strength this time just to see what happens, because this is a frosty look. It is going to look lighter on the other side, remember, when you flip it over. So I'm going to try full strength and see what that's like. I'm just going to randomly put them around. I'm not going to worry about are they connected to flowers properly or not. We're just going to have a bunch of leaves in the background. Now, if you wanted, you could do this part first and then the embossing, which is what I did the first time around. I don't know why. I just thought maybe I wanted to play around with the colors first. But then I thought in showing you, it was easier to have you see the Versamark on the vellum first. Okay, so I'm going to turn around and see how that looks. Okay, that looks nice. So remember, it's going to show up more once it's against some white in the background. So I'm going to leave it like that. Now, this is going to take a little bit to dry also. So I'm going to tell you one little thing. As I was stamping off the first time around on this, I realized that this little collection of leaves could make a nice little border if I did this and then that and turned it around and then turned it around again. Right? That could be fun. So I have a bunch of this on my scrap paper from when I practiced this last night. So I definitely am going to try to make a little border like that. Looks like a little stencil, right? Okay, so let me close up my ink pads. You can also take your heat gun to this ink on the vellum and lightly help dry it, or you can just let it sit for a little bit. I'm going to hold this corner down here. Again, I'll hold that with my bone folder just so it doesn't get too hot. I'm going to run this just for a minute. Dry it off because you don't want to smudge it. I'm holding it kind of high this time just so the hot air gets around. Okay, another thing you can do is just blot it if you're careful. You can put a piece of paper on top of it, or you can turn this over and just lightly press it down without sliding it. And it could pick up any extra ink that might still be a little wet, and then it'll dry better. And very carefully pull it up. Okay, so I didn't get too much on there, so it must be fairly dry. All right, so now we just glue it and put it all together. So we're going to bring back our frame. And I'll use the silicone mat, so if I get any glue, it's not going to be on my surface where it's going to be forever sticky. Because the silicone mat, the glue will just rub right off. And also makes it easier for you to see this white paper on it, doesn't it? Okay, very thin bead of glue all the way around in between those stitchings. If you have a fine tip glue pen, maybe you like to use that fine tip glue container there. All right, so we're going to have the embossed side down, and that 2 5/8 vellum will fit right on that frame if you're using the Stylish Shapes dies. Otherwise, just cut it down. Let's see, I got a little ink on my fingers from rubbing that, so just be real careful. That's one good reason why it's on the back and you have the embossing on the front. Also, so that you have a little bit more subtle look there. Okay, well, inky fingers, that's part of the game, right? All right, now you need either your foam strips, which you can get in the regular catalog. I think it's page 128 or somewhere in the back there where you see your dimensional dots. You can also get foam strips. They, I think there's about 10 yards of the strips all together. So you can just peel one off. And I have dedicated scissors for my sticky things. Going to go right across the edge there. And you want to fill the whole frame with your foam strips. Now, if you don't have these foam strips, don't worry too much, because you can always use the edges of your Stampin' Dimensionals. And the mini Stampin' Dimensionals even have a wider edge that makes it a little bit easier to cut. Okay, look at that. That fits perfectly there. I just need one more side. So remember, don't throw out, you know, the edges here. You can always cut those just like this. And then you'll have a strip that you can add on there. So I just need a little bit longer. All right. There we go. All right, so now before I put this on my card, I want to stamp my sentiment first, because you know how that is. If I put this on the front of my card and then I stamp my sentiment wrong, it's kind of ruined unless I try to find a way to cover it up, which I'm sure I would, but oh no, I got a little bit of ink on there. I'm going to have to doctor that up somehow. Okay, well, this is for demonstration purposes anyway. All right, so I'm going to line up about where I think I want my card to be. And then I'm going to wipe my fingers so I don't make any more mess. Nice to keep a little water or baby wipes nearby. Clean your fingers. Okay, so I'm going to put my sentiment right down here, and I'm going to use, I love the fonts on here on Plentiful Plants. I'm going to do what I did on the other one, to a dear friend, because that can go for anything, for birthday or thank you or thinking of you, whatever. And I just love that pretty little font. Okay, so you can do this in black. I have my Memento ink here, or choose one of the colors. Maybe the shaded spruce might be a good option too. Who knows? Okay, so I'm going to think where I want that to be, right about here. I'll move this out of the way and stamp that down. There we go. And then we just have to peel off the back and stick that on. But first I'm going to put it on my card base. That might be a little easier to do first. Now, if you don't want this extra layer, that's okay too. It just makes it a little bit, adds a little more interest to it, I think. But you can certainly do it without. The first card that I showed you before didn't have it, so you can see the difference. Okay, now we just peel off the backs of these. Okay, I'm going to try not to touch this too much because, like I said, it does take a little while to dry. And at some point, some of the ink could still maybe rub off even after a while. So, I'm going to put that little smudge on the side. Maybe I can add a little flower or something over there. Okay, I like to use my top of my grid paper to center. So I'm at 2 1/8 on both sides of my 0. And that will help me center my die cut frame. Okay, so there we go. So now we have just a little, like a little pop-up window there. So my first one, like I said, had no extra layer on it. It was just the card base with the frame. And then this one has the extra layer on it. So it just adds a little bit more to that. I think frames it a little bit nicely. All right, so let me show you another one that I did. I did one embossed with gold. I did ferns in the background, and then I did a gold dragonfly on there, and I embossed the sentiment in gold as well, just to give a little bit more shine there. Okay, so it kind of looks nice. It gives it more dimension, even though it's only stamped behind the vellum, and this is on the front. Somehow you still get that feeling of depth in there, right? It kind of like fools your eye to think it's back there. So one other one that I'm going to try to do, I'm not going to necessarily do it in front of you right now, but I was playing around with the Wisteria set, which is here, Wisteria Wishes. And I thought it might be nice to have these somehow hanging in the background and then something in the front, but I'm thinking, okay, I didn't want to cover these with white, so I was just playing around on my scrap piece of vellum. I stamped the branch in garden green, and I stamped the flowers hanging. I did these in Highland Heather, and then so that would be my back. And then I was thinking, okay, the front, I didn't want to do, I practiced with this little detail thing in white, but of course I knew that was going to be too much. But then what I did was, after I stamped in white, I took my Stampin' Blend and went over it, over the white embossing with my Stampin' Blend, so that it gave that illusion of that's the part that's forward and the rest of the flowers behind, so it gave a little bit more depth that way. So I'm going to try doing that on one of the other cards. So maybe I'll even try that one in a circle. So we'll see how that comes about. But it looks really, really nice in person. That maybe the camera isn't showing it up quite as nice as it could be when you are looking at it in person. Let me just put this up against. So once we put this, oh, sorry, shaking it. Once we put this up against something, then we'll be able to see that it has that dimension there. So we'll give that a try. Then another thing I thought I would try, and I'm not going to keep you for this either, but the piece that came out of the center of those frames, I was thinking of maybe putting that on the card in the background and then stamping something else on there, like whether little speckles or something, and just put that one right on the card. So now it's going to look like we have 3 layers going on there. So maybe something like maybe this one, maybe the smaller little dragonflies, or maybe some speckly things, or if you have leaves here, maybe some flowers in the background. So I'm going to play around with that idea and see how that all goes. So always trying to use up all the pieces, right? So I hope you will try that, and I will post more pictures of more ideas that I do at the end.